Yes, girl, get your man. Hey guys, it's Sarah. Welcome back to another video here on my channel. I hope you guys are having a good start to your new year. I am super busy right now, just getting things ready for these first 2 weeks. My cousin's getting married. A lot's happening. Today we are jumping back into our Throne of Glass recaps, and we're going to be talking about Heir of Fire. If you guys aren't already subscribed, don't forget to do that now, just so you don't miss any new updates in this series. I'm planning on, fingers crossed, being done with Throne of Glass before the book comes out, Crescent City 3, okay? And that's happening at the end of this month, and I'm so excited. We'll just keep the intro short today. Let's just get right into it. Quick recap from the end of Crown of Midnight. We now know that our main girl, Celaena, is actually Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, the heir of Terrasen. And because of Chaol and his smart plans, she's been sent over to Wendlyn, which is the homeland of her mother's people, so that she can hopefully kill the royal family. But I don't know about you guys, I don't think that's gonna happen. So we open up with Celaena, who is not using her name yet. Okay, she admitted to Chaol who she was, but she has not accepted that about herself yet. She is absolutely rotting away on the rooftops of the town she's staying in, which is like outside of Wendlyn. It's like the capital city, and it's where the royal family lives. And yeah, she has no plans on killing them. Her cousin Galan, I'm pretty sure that's how you're supposed to say his name. It's Galen or Galan. I don't know. I like Galen better, so maybe we'll stick with that. He's so sweet and kind and wonderful. The people love him, and he's not just like a spoiled little prince, okay? He's a blockade runner, so he's keeping the city actively safe from the naval armies of the king because they keep trying to come over, but there's like a barrier reef that protects the coast of Wendlyn, and he's out there running the blockades, trying to keep everybody safe and keeping the armies from coming in. She's also been fighting again. She's just back in her self-pity era, so she's just wallowing in all her guilt and shame. Remember all those promises she made to Nehemia? Now she feels even more like a coward because she doesn't have the strength left to figure them out and handle them. Now she thinks all she's going to be able to do is defeat the king by destroying the word keys, and then that will end up destroying her in the process. So she's never going to be able to uphold all the things she wanted to do for Nehemia. She is planning on going to see Maeve in Doranel. Remember, Maeve is her aunt technically, but she just hasn't gotten up the courage to do it yet. So she's wandering down an alley, and then a giant fae male like drops into the alley with her and is basically like, "Come with me, I've been summoned to fetch you." I say male instead of man because this is one of those ridiculous SJM things. This is one of my like least favorite things, in fact, okay? So for humans and mortals and the witches, they say man and woman, but then for the fae, they say male and female, and it's just like, it's just icky and binary, and I don't like it. So he's tall and big and muscly with the pointed canines and ears of the fae. He also has long, pretty princess white hair and pine green eyes. Remember when I said everybody and their mother has green eyes? Rowan is no exception. Right, his name is Rowan, by the way, and he was sent by Maeve to collect Celaena. Also, he has a tattoo down one side of his face that like disappears under his shirt. Back at the castle, Chaol is struggling to come to terms with what the truth is about Aelin and what that means for all of them. He's just sort of ignoring it because he's like, that's a nightmare that I don't want to open yet. Also, he can't even really accept that she's kind of dark and scary, and she's an assassin that kills people. So how is he supposed to accept that she's the heir and the Queen of Terrasen? Like, this is just not going well for him. He's also fighting with Dorian because Dorian has magic, and Chaol says that he wants nothing to do with that, but in reality, Chaol is just trying to avoid him to keep him safe. But Dorian is pissed because Chaol's avoiding him, and because Chaol sent Celaena away without even telling Dorian, which was a breach of trust. While the boys are having dinner at the castle, Aedion Ashriver comes strolling in. He is the king's infamous general of the north, also called the Wolf of the North, and he's Aelin's cousin. So he's a member of Terrasen's like ruined court, and now he works for the King of Adarlan. He's a swaggering, arrogant jerk, and the boys do not like him. He also has the same color hair and eyes as Celaena, so both of them looking at him, it's like painful because they look so similar. He controls a legion of men called the Bane, and they are known for their skill and brutality. They keep the rebels in line in the north. He carries the Sword of Arinth, which was the capital city of Terrasen, which is a strange choice for somebody who fights for the king. Also, he wears a black bestie ring, so maybe he's not of his right mind. We cut abruptly to a new POV. We're gonna be meeting new characters in this book, okay? And they are some of my favorites. First up is Manon. I think her name is actually Manon, but I simply refuse. And I'm so sorry if that upsets any of you. I will not be calling her Manon. I just won't. I read the whole series thinking her name was Manon, and I'm not going back, okay? I'm just not. So she's hiding in a cottage, and some men attack because they're looking for the Croaken witch that has come to stay in town. It's very like Salem witch trials-y, okay? But surprise, Manon's not a Croaken. She's an Iron Teeth, and so she uses her claws and her teeth and just shreds the men for funsies because she eats them. So she's actually Manon Blackbeak, heir to the Blackbeak witch clan, which is one of the Iron Teeth clans. She's been out hunting Croaken witches, which is something that they all do. She, unlike anybody else in the Iron Teeth clans, wears a blood red cloak, which is what the Croakens wear. It's from the first Croaken she ever killed, and she wears it as like a trophy. Quick history lesson just to refresh in case anybody's forgotten. In the old witchlands, which are called the Western Wastes, the Croakens used to rule, and they're very much like more spiritual and more like preachy is how the Iron Teeth feel about them. They're just like more connected to nature, kind of like what we would think of as like pagans, I think now. The Iron Teeth rose up and killed all of them, but before they died, the Croakens cast a curse on the land, and that turned them into actual wastelands. So even though the Iron Teeth rule them now, nothing will grow and they can't live there. Celaena and Rowan have been traveling in total silence, which is great because our girl is exhausted and she simply cannot bring herself to care. They aren't allowed to light fires because the creatures in the woods are scary, but she also keeps seeing the little folk of this land, so all the little tiny fairies. They come to her at night, and she realizes that maybe they're curious because they know who she is and they know where she came from, and they've been cut off from their sisters and brothers for all this time, and so they don't know if the other fairies are alive. So she whispers to them, they still live, and they all disappear. Dorian is hiding his magic from his dad still, and he's starting to get really stressed about it because remember, it kind of explodes out of him whenever he gets too emotional, and his dad makes him really angry. He gets told that he needs to entertain Aedion for the day because his dad wants to like force him to have more like courtly friends. The day doesn't go well though, and Aedion ends up tripping Dorian into the rose bushes. No, I am not kidding. He literally just sticks out his foot and kicks him over into the bushes. So Dorian has to go get his hand looked at, and he meets a young healer named Sorsha. She's the girl that has been healing all of them the whole time they've been at the castle, but he's never taken the time to learn her name. She's really, really sweet, and she clearly really likes Dorian. She tells him that she noticed the injuries and, you know, was a little suspicious and curious, and the healers are supposed to keep record of all of the things that they do in the castle, but she said sometimes we forget to write everything down, meaning that there's no record of the like strange magical wounds and all the things that Celaena was getting up to in the last book. Nobody knows about any of that except for Sorsha, and she's not telling anybody. Then we get a quick Sorsha POV. And yeah, guys, she has a deep, deep, deep crush on Dorian, okay? She's been in love with him for years. Celaena and Rowan get to Mistward, which is a fortress that borders Doranel, Maeve's lands. It's filled with demi-fae, which are like half fae and, you know, quarter fae and stuff like that. They're the ones that aren't powerful enough to be brought into Doranel, so they live there in the fortress together, kind of like coexisting. Some of them are still trying to figure out if they can get into Doranel and like earn Maeve's favor, and some of them just live there because they want to live amongst their own people. Maeve is actually there waiting for her. She calls her Aelin, but Celaena's like, I don't know who that is. Aelin is dead, and like refuses to admit that that's who she's supposed to be. A few little details about Maeve quickly. She's super beautiful with black, depthless eyes. She has an owl sitting beside her at all times on her little like seat throne. And her magic feels like talons trying to rip into your mind and cleave your skull in half. Okay, Rhys, I see you. Turns out Rowan is actually Prince Rowan, and he's from Mora's line, so he's technically related to Aelin because remember, Maeve, Mab, and Mora are all sisters. Maeve makes a point of being like, there's some ancient ancestry between the two of you. And listen, they try to bypass over this as if these two are not cousins. I'm gonna say what I said to my friend that really ruined this for her, and I'm really sorry if it upsets any of you, but I could not stop thinking about it because I was like, is SJM really trying to trick us right now? Like, am I thinking about this too hard? But listen, okay, hear me out, okay? Rowan is super old, all right? But we learn that his parents were already old, and then they had him as a kid, okay? Now, he's been alive for like 500-600 years, okay? So he has nothing's diluted his bloodline, okay? There was Mora, and then there were his parents, and then there's him, okay? Aelin is the same way, except on her side, there's like a few more sets of people, but not much because the Fae live for a really long time, so they don't have mortal lifespans. So it's not like there's generations on generations running between them. There's just been a lot of time that they've been on the earth alive. That is not the same thing as the bloodline getting diluted. I refuse to look at it that way. It's not true. So also, yes, because she's Aelin, she's Dorian's cousin, okay? And they are more distantly related because Dorian's a human. So his bloodline's been going on for longer. I just enjoy all of that, okay? I'm sorry, but you needed to know the truth. Back to what Maeve is telling Celaena in this moment. Apparently, Evelyn, Aelin's mom, had intentionally kept Aelin from coming to Maeve, even though Maeve wanted to know her because they didn't live in her lands anymore and they were trying to keep her from them. This was a promise that Evelyn had made to bring Aelin back, and she broke it. So then when the king attacked Terrasen, Maeve was like, oh, I don't help promise breakers, and that's why she didn't send aid all those years ago. Maeve tells her that if she wants to know more about the word keys, she's happy to answer all of her questions, but Aelin is going to have to control her power and earn her place in Doranel and then go in and get the answers from Maeve. So Celaena's gonna have to stay and train with Rowan until she can control herself, and then she'll be able to go into Doranel and talk to Maeve again. Celaena is so disgusted by what's happened and annoyed with herself for not already being powerful enough to get what she wants from Maeve that she ends up provoking Rowan, because remember, she kind of goes after fights when she feels like she deserves to be yelled at. She ends up saying, Fae like you make me understand the King of Adarlan's decisions a little bit more. And Rowan punches her in the face. People get very, very, very upset about this, and I am not trying to downplay it, but I am just going to give you my opinion, which is that the way the Fae are written is not the same as the way the mortals are written, okay? So there's just like a different code of conduct. The Fae, especially in Throne of Glass, are very much like animalistic. In a lot of ways, they're very similar to like the way the vampires are in the Vampire Diaries, where there's just like a different element to them that is like above human. So in moments like this where they rear up at each other and fight, there's like a level of equality to it where like Rowan doesn't look at her and go like, I should never hit a woman. He just looks at her and sees another Fae because that's technically what Celaena is. And also, in this moment when it happens, Celaena is like, yeah, I deserved that. I never should have said that. That was like one of the most disgusting things I ever could have said to him. He also knows that she's egging him on intentionally, so they end up getting into a fight, but it's pretty pathetic because she's not strong enough to fight with him yet. So he reminds her that that is exactly why she's here and she has a lot to learn. we go back to a Manon POV. We learn that she's in control of the 13, which are 12 other witches, making them a little coven of 13, which I just love. And they are the very best of the Blackbeak clans. Some of them are family, like her second, Astern, is one of her cousins, but they don't treat each other with love or kindness. Everything is very like militant and about control and power. We learn that her grandmother, the head of the Blackbeak clan, so the matron for them, has gold-flecked eyes, but Manon's eyes are solid gold. She's never asked why that's so important, but she knows that from the moment she was born, her grandmother was like, this witch is gonna be the very best of all of us, and she's gonna be the one that like does everything we need. We're gonna hone her into the perfect little weapon. She is everything to me, and that's why Manon is heir. They've been summoned to go with the grandma to a meeting. Duke Parrington isn't named, but it's pretty clear that that's who they're meeting with. There are also 2 prison wagons with him, and it's safe to assume that that's Roland and Caltaine being taken away. So the grandma and Duke Parrington talk, and there's a deal that's offered where the king wants them to come and join his army and fly for them on wyverns that he's been breeding in the Farian Gap. If they do that, after a few years, they'll be given the wyverns and they can go take back their homeland. They used to fly on brooms, and then when magic like was taken away, they lost that ability. So the prospect of being able to fly, even if it's on wyverns, which are like pretty scary, they're like big giant dragons, they're excited and they're ready to do it. So all of the Iron Teeth now have been summoned to the Farian Gap, and they all start heading that way. Cale's men back at the castle keep getting summoned to parties that Adian is throwing, but whenever Cale goes to try to collect them, he realizes that Adian isn't even at these parties. So what's going on there? He decides that he needs to follow Adian and figure out what he's up to because he doesn't trust him. Selena gets given a magical salve from Rowan. Even though he says she deserved the punch, he wants her to heal it. And then she starts her first shift down in the kitchens. She meets Imris, the old cook, and Luca, his assistant. She calls herself Elentia, which is the name that Nehemia had given her. The demi-fae, like I said, that live there in the fortress have definitely like a pretty strong family atmosphere about them. So breakfast is this big like chaotic affair where all these people come and go and the plates are filled and everybody's talking, and it's really kind of like lovely and cozy. We learn that Imris has a mate, not a husband. His name is Malachi, because the Fae have mating bonds. They don't do marriage the way that humans do. They also explain to Selena that the Fae look down on the demi-Fae, and even if they get into Doranel, their lives aren't really that great. So sometimes it's better for them to just live together amongst themselves. We also learn a little bit more about Rowan. He's one of the 6 guards that work closest with Maeve. They all have blood oaths to her, which are like these unbreakable vows, basically. He's super old and super grumpy and doesn't talk to anyone ever. Luca also says that he's bloodthirsty and cruel, and that the tattoo on his face is a list of all the people he's ever killed. So the witches arrive at the Farian Gap, which is located in the Rune Mountains. Interesting name choice, SJM, seeing as how you never repeat names. All the groups are fighting amongst themselves because the Yellow Legs are unhinged monsters, the Blue Bloods are preppy little hippies, and the Blackbeaks are fierce warriors. They cross over a sky bridge to the mountain where the wyverns are being kept, and they finally see them for the first time. They're kind of being treated like dogs in dog fighting, okay? So they're being bred and trained and taught to like kill and hunt, but they're using other wyverns to do that. Manon gets her eyes on Titus, which is the biggest and nastiest bull in the whole arena, and she's like, that's the one I want, that will be my dragon. After her shift in the kitchens, Selena goes out with Rowan for her first day of training. He wants her to shift, but it's too hard for her. She doesn't know how to use her magic, and just like willy-nilly shifting is not gonna work. She's also exhausted, like I said, and he's not really offering her any training tips. He's just screaming, shift! Shift into her face. He ends up calling her a coward, and that triggers her PTSD, and she shuts down completely. So he takes her out to a field, which is overrun by wights that are just like this little creature that's been plaguing the town and like terrorizing the locals. He's like, if you can get across, then you can go right into Doranel and we don't have to worry about your magic. I don't care. But instead of being captured by a white, when she gets into the middle of the field, she's attacked by the most beautiful man she's ever seen with a black necklace around his throat. His magic is like darkness, and it surrounds her and then makes her relive her worst memories over and over again. Rowan saves her, and then we realize that they have this weird ability to like talk without talking out loud. Basically mind speak, where they just like telepathically can look at each other and like make an expression and know what the other one is thinking. Weird. We will come back to it. He doesn't know what attacked her, and given how old he is, that scares both of them. Chaol now has about 2 months before he needs to go back to Aniel to fulfill his bargain with his dad. He asks for more time because he says he needs to train a replacement, but in reality, he's just plotting how to help Celaena and Dorian. Dorian calls Sorsha up to his tower room to help with a sparring injury, and she's like losing it over how cute and sweet he always is. He's like super respectful and kind and just the best boy around. He's flawless. I love him. He's super curious about her and wants to know more about where she's from. And when he finds out that her village and family were killed, he's like super apologetic and heartbroken. He ends up going so far as to ask for the specific name of her village because he wants it added to his personal map of the continent so that it's not forgotten. She tells him that she never told on him or his friends because she can tell that they're good people and they don't deserve to get in trouble with the king. Manon is starting to fight with Iskra, who's the heir to the Yellowlegs clan. They're learning how to fight on like more calmer wyverns, and the 13 have their first official flight where all of the other witches come out and watch them. Manon goes, "We are the 13, from now until the darkness claims us. Let us remind them why." They are brilliant at flying because they're good at everything and they understand each other and just work together as like a really seamless unit. After the flight, Manon's grandmother takes her aside and is like, "Look, we're gonna host war games to figure out who's gonna be in charge once it's time to join the armies, and I want you to make sure you win because you need to be wing leader." Celaena is not doing well at all over in the fortress. She hates the training, she hates working in the kitchens, and she hates Rowan. Late one night, she finds everybody gathered in the kitchens listening to Imrys tell stories in front of the fire. Turns out, he's a storyteller, which is like an ancient fae job title. So he's the one that like collects all their histories, not just from like the people that he meets, but also from the land and the spirits. It's really sweet. She also realizes that Rowan's second form is a giant hawk, and that hawk was watching her for weeks, basically from the moment she arrived into Winland. They ask her to tell a story from her lands, but she refuses because she says she doesn't have anything worth telling. Dorian has been visiting Sorsha more and more, and they're really starting to get close, and she's warming up to him. She gets comfortable with him enough to finally ask what the injuries were caused from when that creature attacked them at the end of the last book, and Dorian tells her everything. She says that she understands why he didn't say anything because the king will absolutely kill Chaol and Celaena for covering that up, and Dorian's magic erupts. Instead of freaking out, Sorsha takes the blame for the explosion and is like, "Don't worry, you're gonna help me flip this table and we're gonna pretend like I did it. We're gonna say I tripped and knocked it over. Everything's gonna be fine. I'm not gonna tell anybody. And then soon, I'm gonna help you learn how to control it." Chaol follows Aedion like he planned, and he realizes that the general has been getting fake drunk and then going out into the night and disappearing from his own parties. He gets kidnapped again because he's honestly not a very good guard. Like, how did you not see that coming? It's the same people that kidnapped him in Crown of Midnight. That same group that was working with Archer, now they're working with Aedion. The guy with the twin swords that fought Celaena is actually Rin Alsbrook, and the man that was older that like stopped her from fighting and kept her back from killing everybody before Archer stepped in is his grandfather, Murtaugh. Aedion is there with them working because the ring he was given by the king doesn't actually control him. His face senses were like, "Don't trust the ring," and he's been able to like resist its call. So he's a rebel. Before they can turn on him and kill him, Chaol is like, "Aelin is alive." Adian makes a deal with him where he'll tell him what he knows about magic and why it disappeared if Chaol will tell him about Aelin. We get a POV of Adian where we learn that he absolutely adored Aelin and she meant everything to him. From the time he was born, his like most important title was cousin, kin, protector, and he feels like he failed her. Turns out he has the Sword of Arinth because once he'd become valuable enough in the army, he asked the king for it so that he could keep it and give it back to Aelin when he found her again. Rowan is still trying to force Celaena to shift, but it's not working. They get into another weird fight. There's a little bit of like sexual tension going on. It's a weird dynamic that they have at the beginning of this book. He ends up biting her, which again is like a weird fey animalistic dominance thing. I don't know what to tell you, but it works, and she gets so angry that she shifts. Her magic starts to erupt out of her, and even though she's terrified of it, Rowan is like, it's okay, let it out, you need to get used to this feeling. And he has ice and wind powers, the perfect complement to her wildfire, some might say. So he's able to like smother the flames before she can hurt herself or hurt him. She gets overwhelmed by the magic though and turns back into a human, and then he's kind of being instigaty and being like, you need to just learn how to do it again, let's do this again, we can just blah blah blah, keep doing it. It's not going well, so they're sort of softening to each other but also still deeply at each other's throats. And then he's like, what if I just lash you, would that help? Which is a horrible, terrible thing to threaten, and it also triggers her PTSD. She rears up at him and is like, do whatever you want, but you take a whip to me and I will rip off your arms. Are you insane? He says she's worthless, and perhaps she'd be more useful to the world if she'd actually died all those years ago. Which is, again, such an out-of-pocket thing to say. What's wrong with you, Rowan? So she goes running off into the woods. She ends up lighting a fire, which is the one thing he told her not to do. So she gets tracked down by skinwalkers. Yes, those kind of skinwalkers. It's so bad and scary. Don't worry though, Rowan shows up. He tells her that if she doesn't shift, they're both gonna die, and she's so scared of him dying to save her that she shifts and they take off running. They jump off a cliff to escape, and she turns around and like is gonna unleash her fire. She yells at Rowan to shift. He flies off. She explodes basically and ignites all the skinwalkers and burns them. This interaction, the fact that she saved him and everything, finally sort of softens them even more to each other. They keep going back and forth. Like I said, it's like they want to like each other, but also they want to tear each other's throats out. He tells her though that the reason he wants her to master shifting is because it scares her, and if she's not careful, she'll burn out and then die, and her magic will just overwhelm her and kill her. He also gives her his jacket and cloak because once you suffer from burnout, you get really cold, so she can't warm herself up. He gives her those, and then they go back to the fortress together. It's time for the witches to choose their official wyverns. Remember, Manon wants Titus, okay? But so does Iskra. So while Titus is down in the pit, Iskra pushes Manon in there, and Titus is so stupid that he's like, ooh, yummy, and he goes to eat Manon. Astern attacks Iskra, like, immediately on sight before anybody can stop her, but the grandma is like, no one else jump in there with her, let her figure this out on her own. Surprisingly, one of the bait beasts that's like chained to the walls inside the pit helps Manon and makes it very clear, like, I'll protect you, get me out of here. He looks at like the chain that's attaching him to the wall. She breaks it and he launches himself at Titus and attacks. He's a smart little wyvern, and even though he's clearly like super banged up and very hurt, he's clever enough that he manages to kill Titus, who's like twice his size, triple his strength. Like, it should not be possible, and yet he wins. Without a second thought, Manon claims him because she's like, that is a warrior wyvern right there, that's the one I want. She names him Abraxas, which is like the serpent that's connected to the goddess in their mythology for the witches. And then she gets slapped by her grandma because she's like, why would you pick the runt of the freaking litter? Are you insane? Manon has to train him separately because he's been alone for so long and so mistreated that he's really skittish, but she knows it's gonna pay off because there's something about him that tells her he's really freaking smart. Chaol takes Adian down to the tomb to tell him everything about Celaena actually being Aelin, and yikes, Dorian's listening at the door because he was coming down to hopefully talk to Gavin. He's heartbroken that Chaol didn't trust him with all of this. Aedion finds out that Dorian has magic because Dorian is so upset that he can't control himself, and he drops the temperature in the room to below freezing. Aedion then goes out to meet with Ren and Murtaugh to confirm that Aelin is alive and all the rumors are true. So they plan to raise a court in her name so that they can be ready when she comes home. Rowan and Celaena are training, and they find a body in the woods that has been drained of all life. It's basically like a mummy, just like a shell of the person, and it smells like the creature that she faced off with in the field, that like beautiful man with the black necklace. That's what it smells like. Chaol and Aedion meet up in Celaena's old apartment, and we get a POV of Aedion walking around the rooms and looking at all her stuff. He looks at her dresses and realizes like how tall she's gotten, and that while they've been separated, she grew into a woman, and he has no idea who she even is anymore. He's heartbroken to think of the fact that while she was living this double life, she knew that he was being a general for the king and doing all of these unspeakable things. So he's like, she's never gonna forgive me. She must hate me. She must think I'm this terrible, despicable monster. I've broken her heart. I've broken my heart. I've ruined everything. I'm the worst. He tells Chaol all he knows about the day magic disappeared, which is not a lot, but it does lead them on the right path. Basically, there was a wave from the south and a wave from the southwest that like swept the land, and then there was another one over in the desert. So this weird spell like swept over the whole continent, and magic just disappeared. Dorian and Sorsha have been looking for a way to suppress his magic to keep him safe. She has the theory that maybe if they can up the iron content in his blood, it would help him suppress it easier. They try it and it works, and he's so happy and pleased that he kisses her, because remember, they have crushes on each other, but then she panics and runs away, and he's like, oh my god, should I not have done that? Did she not want me to do that? I should have asked first, I'm the worst. And he has a little spiral about not doing the right thing. Manon orders the humans that are taking care of Abraxas to leave him alone because they scare him, and she's like, I don't want any more men in here with him, and I certainly don't want to see a whip anywhere near his cell, okay? She pulls a hiccup maneuver and goes right on in there with him unafraid and holds out her hand and is like, my name is Manon, your name is Abraxos, we belong to each other. And he puts his giant snout into her hand. She forces him, gently but firmly, because he can understand her, which is suspicious, to have his broken teeth and claws replaced with iron ones. And she's like, we're gonna match, and it's gonna hurt like hell, but you're gonna let them do it because I need you to be a highly skilled warrior like I know you are. The really big problem though, above the teeth and claws, is his wings, which are fairly shredded, and it doesn't seem like he's gonna be able to properly fly. Celaena and Rowan visit a human village where there was another husk of a body found. It's a 20-mile trek, so she needs to shift in order to be able to make the journey. This is like one of my favorite scenes, maybe my favorite scene with them in this book. They end up like chasing each other through the trees, and she realizes that Rowan isn't trying to attack her. He's playing. They're having fun. They're having like a game of Fae tag in the woods. This is the moment where Celaena starts to realize that her Fae body really isn't that bad, and it's kind of amazing to be so in tune with the forest around her and to run and feel freedom like this. She's never felt it in her human body. The humans in the village that they go to are afraid of them because they're both in Fae form, but then once Celaena starts spending money, they open up and talk to them, but they don't know anything, so they end up just spending the night at an inn. Celaena has a dream that night about her mother calling her Fireheart. She knows that when she was a child, she almost burned down the Library of Arinth and got in a lot of trouble for it. She had a really hard time controlling her powers, and her parents didn't know what to do for her. She also vividly remembers Aedion and that he was always with her no matter what, and she deeply misses him. Sorsha is fighting with herself over whether or not she should give in and kiss Dorian again, because she absolutely wanted to be kissed, okay? She just panicked. She helps him in his tower and then leaves, and then promptly has a panic attack, like leaning back against the closed door, turns around, knocks, and then grabs him and kisses him. Yes, girl, get your man. Chaol and Aedion meet up with Ren and Murtaugh again, but Ren gets attacked by a group of the king's men. They're not Chaol's men, but they're royal guards, and they're dressed head to toe in black. Bryn and Murtaugh don't have anywhere to stay, so Kale gives them access to Celaena's apartment, saying that he knows the owner won't mind. Murtaugh explains a little bit more about the waves that swept the continent the day magic was destroyed. Turns out they make the perfect shape of a triangle, and they came from 3 distinct points and just swept inward. Things are getting very dangerous and very confusing. Manon is trying to train Abraxas by herself, but he is very stubborn and very annoying. She takes him out to the fresh air and tries to feed him some frozen meat that they keep in supply, but he refuses it and just keeps sniffing the wildflowers that they've come to see. She's like, you can't possibly actually like the flowers. And she says he gives her a look to say, I most certainly can. She decides, fine, if you don't want the meat, I'll eat it myself. And then when she takes a bite of it, she's like, oh, what in the frick? It's like rotten, even though it looks normal. Turns out the men that live and work in the mountains also taste really bad, because remember, the witches eat people. So she makes a plan to stop feeding Abraxas the bad meat, stop herself from eating any more of it, and she tells the other 13 that they are not to eat any more of the meat or any more of the men while they're staying in the gap. Her grandma wants her airborne immediately, so she has to force Abraxas to fly even though he isn't ready. He nearly kills them because they fall over a cliff, but they go over like the bunny slope cliff basically, and right before they hit the bottom, he opens his wings and he manages the flight, and they take off together and go soaring. While they're in the air, he lets out this like joyous cry, and she knows immediately that that's what it is because he's never flown before. And she's so happy, and she knows that nobody can see her, so she just throws out her arms and enjoys the flight with him. Now remember, the witches don't know how to be happy or joyful or show love. Okay, so this is a big deal for her. Then Manon brings the 13 to her secretly so that they can start training as a group, because she wants them to be like elite by the time the war games happen. While Imrys is telling his stories back at the fortress, Celaena asks for more information on Maeve so that they can learn more about her. We learn that she nearly mated a long time ago, but then the man that she loved died, so instead she changed her focus to gathering warriors, and those are like her most cherished people now. Maeve is ruthless and cunning, but instead of taking over the world, she just settled herself down in Doranel and keeps her lands peaceful and doesn't stir up any trouble. Then a big mountain lion comes prowling into the fortress, and Celaena's like, whoa, who is that? But then the guy shifts, and he's this lovely golden-haired man, and Rowan gets up and talks to him. It's very clear that Rowan does not want her involved, so they stalk off together and don't tell Celaena where they're going. She gets nervous since they skip dinner, so she takes them some food and catches Rowan tattooing him. His name is Gavriel, by the way. It's in the same old language as the tattoo that Rowan has, but she doesn't know what it means. Rowan gets really annoyed with her and makes it really clear that he doesn't think she needs to be involved and she needs to leave. She tells him, I'm sorry, you just left me down there and I don't have anybody left. I just wanted, and he's like, I don't care what you wanted. I don't care about you. You are not my friend. You are nothing to me. So she realizes that the one person left alive that knows enough about her to know who she really is still hates her. And you know how she's been fighting this whole time to keep that little light inside of her that Nehemia said she has? It flickers and goes out. So great job, Rowan. Excellent inspirational skills. The next morning, Imrys is all excited when she comes down to the kitchen, and he wants to show her this beautiful knife that his mate brought him back, but the knife came from Elwë, and so she loses all control and yells at them and snarls and is just like, I don't care about any of you. Leave me alone. We get a Rowan point of view. Turns out the tattoos that he has on himself and the ones that he gives other people are lists of the names of the fallen. So they're like ancient stories of the people they've lost. He goes down to eat, and Imrys rips him a new one and is just like, I don't know who you think you are, but it's disgusting that you're so hell-bent on destroying that girl when she has no one left and no hope. And yes, Imrys knows exactly who she is. From the second she stepped inside the kitchen, he knew she was Aelin because he freaking knew her mom, Evelyn. Turns out she came to Mistward and worked there in the kitchens with him because she was fighting with Maeve, trying to get the Demi-Fae led into Doranel. So Imrys tells him that if nothing else, Rowan needs to help her because of what she represents to the people like him. hope for a better world. Celaena wanders the forest and admits to herself that she's been lost, and she's been lost for 10 years, and she has no idea how to find her way back home. Rowan finds her and sits with her. He says that they don't have to talk about what happened, but she needs to come with him because he thinks that he's finally starting to figure her out. He takes her to a cave where there's a frozen lake, and Luca is chained up in the center of it. He's like, go get him. Don't burn the ice or you'll hurt him. Control your magic. She goes running out to get Luca, and she manages to get out there fine, even though she cracks the ice a little bit. Because she's worried about keeping Luca safe, she controls herself. And then they realize that the giant lake monster trapped under the frozen water that Rowan thought was asleep is not. Rowan finds a sword hidden in one of the walls of the cave and throws it to her. It's this beautiful golden sword with a big ruby in the hilt. There's also a little gold ring inside the scabbard of the sword. They manage to escape, but it is harrowing, and Luca almost dies. Once they get back to the fortress, they fight again, and this time she manages to get a few punches of her own. She tells him to never bring anybody into their training sessions again because she is sick of people getting hurt for her. She breaks down about Nehemia's death and says that she hates her for leaving her, and it's left her with this like weight and guilt that she doesn't know what to do with. She also is like holding Rowan's wrist to keep him from moving while she's yelling at him, and she accidentally burns him. Like there's a perfect handprint around his arm. She burns through his tattoo, but he didn't say anything. He just let her do it while she talked. It's giving that moment when Cassian is holding the gloves and Feyre punches through them, and Cassian's like, I'm okay, I can take it. It's giving that. She tries to apologize for burning him, and he tells her to never apologize for protecting the people she cares about. When they get back inside, Imris is happy to see that she finally beat Rowan's ass. She gets down on her knees and begs him for forgiveness, and he accepts. That night, Celaena can't sleep, and she feels really guilty about burning Rowan, so she takes him that salve that he had given her that she healed her eye with. Once she gives it to him, he's like, you know, you could technically just heal it yourself, because remember, she has a single drop of water from her mother's bloodline, but she doesn't know how to use it because nobody ever trained her in healing. He opens up and tells her about the story that his tattoo tells. It's how his mate, Lyra, died. She was pregnant, and he had to go away to fight, but he left because he like wanted glory, like he was going for the wrong reasons. And while he was gone, she was killed along with the baby. So he's never forgiven himself for this. And he says for a really long time, he just went wild in the woods, living in his hawk form, until Maeve came and found him and called him into her group to work for her. They now understand each other better, and they decide to try to escape the darkness together. And she says that somewhere in her chest, an ember starts to glow. We get more insight on Ren and Aedion. They both feel like all the things they've had to do to survive after the war are going to lead their people to never forgive them, which is interesting because that's exactly how Aelin feels. Aedion then goes out drinking with Chaol, and because Aedion is popular amongst the soldiers, they trust him a little bit more and they open up and talk. We learn that out in the desert there's a black tower, just like the clock tower that is always guarded by the king's men. There's another one out in the frozen waste. So there's 3 clock towers. They all have to be protected by the king's men at all times, and the men that work there routinely go insane. The towers make a perfect triangle across the continent. Chaol realizes that he's gonna need Dorian's help to figure out if the clock tower really is the thing hurting the magic. The 13 spend 2 weeks training together to become a perfected unit, but unfortunately, Abraxas's wings still aren't strong enough. Manon goes out to the edges of the Rune Mountains to hunt those spiders that make spider silk because she knows that that would fix his wings. They get hit by a really bad storm and end up like huddled together on the side of one of the mountains. Once she wakes up, she realizes that Abraxas like covered her with his wing, but he did it once she'd fallen asleep because he knows that mommy doesn't like to admit weakness, but he didn't want her to freeze to death. The spiders come out to meet Manon and they call each other sisters. We'll come back to this later, but the spiders and the witches were made from the same dark master. The spiders turn on her almost immediately and try to like steal her beauty away. So Manon ends up having Abraxas swipe them off the cliff with his tail, and then they steal the spider silk and run away. Once the silk is grafted onto his wings, they need to make the crossing, which is like not the bunny slope hill, okay, but the big hill that if you don't make it, you will die. He's anxious as hell and refuses to do it with everybody watching. So Manon is like, okay, if you won't listen to me, I will lock you up until you decide that you can. She sends him away down to a cell, but Iskra comes sauntering over and is like, I can get him to listen to you, Manon. And she whips Abraxas. Manon beats her ass, y'all. Just jumps on her, claws out, snarling. It's vicious. The next day, the blue blood heir, Petra, who has been like suspiciously nice to the Blackbeaks this whole time, she comes over to Manon and she's like, my dragon, Keely, wants to give your dragon, Abraxas, some meat. So I've brought it as a little peace offering. And Manon is like, I don't take offerings from rivals. And Petra's like, oh, are we rivals? Celaena and Rowan are officially friends, and she helps him redo the parts of the tattoo that she burned off. They talk about the family they've both lost, and she brings up Aedion again, and we learn that she actually feels guilty about the person he became to survive without her. She admits that she doesn't want her crown because it's too heavy, and she's worried that she doesn't have the strength to keep everybody safe. Dorian and Sorsha are together, but they can't tell anybody because if they do, she will definitely get in trouble and lose her job. Kale comes to ask for help, and Dorian's like, oh, now you want to talk about my magic? Now you need help with my magic? Well, I'm suppressing it. So no, I will not be doing that. He says he's being hypocritical and that he never accepted Celaena for who she really is, and now he can't accept Dorian either. Dorian says he's already made up his mind about Celaena and he knows exactly what he's gonna do when she comes home, and he hopes that Kale will make the same decision. Kale and Aedion meet up with Murtaugh, who'd gone over to Skull's Bay on a mission. There was a creature over there with a collar of black stone that was terrorizing Rolf's pirates. Remember Rolf? He's coming back, don't worry. Also, there's a specific general over there that has now been sent to Winland to attack. Aedion also claps back at Kale and is like, you need to pick a side. And Kale is like, I don't understand why people don't get that I am on Dorian's side. That's it. It's that simple. Dorian only. Aedion gives him shit about being a child and not understanding the complexities of war and the gravity of everything that everybody else has lost. Kale is upset by all of this, but he is really struggling to like come to terms with the right thing to do, and he feels like crippled with uncertainty and unable to make any choices. So he just decides to go to the king and be like, hello, I have to go back to Aniel now. We hit Beltane, which is in May. It's a celebration of spring. Celaena is put in charge of lighting and controlling the fires for the celebration. Initially, she's doing a really good job, and then the magic suddenly overwhelms her. She kind of like self-sabotages herself. That's what happens with all the burnouts. They're always self-inflicted. So she nearly burns herself alive, and Rowan has to like rush her into a bath to cool her down, but then she boils the water and nearly cooks herself. So then they have to get her into another tub, and he has to like freeze the water, and then she melts it, and then he freezes it, and then she melts it over and over again until she slowly calms down. He sees her scars for the first time and gets so upset that he has to leave the room. This will make sense later, but we get a Rowan POV where he's like flying to like release his emotions and not yell and break things because he didn't know all the things that Aelin had gone through. Maeve had lied to him by just not telling him. So this whole time he was bullying her because he thought she was a spoiled little princess that had been hiding from her crown. He didn't know anything about the fact that she had to work for Arabin and the fact that she went to the end of her mines and she worked for the king because she didn't want to. He didn't know any of that. So he's pissed at himself. He feels disgusted by his own behavior. And I'm like, you should have asked more questions, Rowan. You should be a little upset about this. But now he's like, I must make it up to her because I have really screwed up. So he goes back to her and takes her to his room and is like, you are staying here because I'm protecting you forever now. You can never leave. It's like this uncontrollable urge that he can't fight against. Celaena doesn't mind though, because she's also been feeling weirdly territorial about him. Wonder what that could be. She ends up telling him for the first time about what happened to her in the mines, and they fall asleep together, and she says that it heals something inside of her to share those secrets. The next day, he won't let her out of bed because he insists she needs to rest after the burnout. He's done like a full 180, and now he's like this doting, attentive helper to the point of it being kind of annoying. We learn about Karanam, which are these like sets of Fae partners. It's different than being mated to somebody, okay? It's two different things. These guys share power so that when one of them approaches burnout, they can use the other's power and it like keeps that from happening. I wonder why they put that detail in there. He wants to know why she hasn't let a healer get rid of her scars, and she says that she keeps them because she wants the reminders of what she's been through. She tells him that she plans to free the other slaves one day as soon as she can, but she can't accept her crown and become queen because she's so filled with rage that she would have to tear apart the entire world and rebuild it in order to make up for everything, and she doesn't think she has the strength for that. Celaena turns 19 years old. Absurd behavior, SJM. Absurd behavior. Rowan gives her chocolates as a little present. They go back to training, and now she's learning how to like shape her fire instead of just these like wild blasts of it, and she starts to learn how to make shields. Manon's grandmother forces her to make the crossing even though they all know that Abraxas isn't ready. He's still nervous, but he sees the scars from her grandma scratching her, and he hears her grandma bullying her. So he's like, nah, Mom, we can do this together. I believe in us. I will man up and I will do it. And they make the jump. Manon also gets this weird feeling in her chest when she sees Astern watching her, and she realizes that her cousin believes in her and like wants her to succeed. She's like, what is this warmth spreading in my chest? This is awful. I don't like it. The other wyverns down in the mountain know that Abraxas is about to jump, and they start like beating their wings to make a sound. The 13 start like banging their shields to keep the beat for him. Then the other Blackbeak clans join in, and then Petra starts clacking her dagger and her sword together, and the other Blue Bloods are like, oh shit, the heir's doing it, and they start doing it too. When they make the jump, they nearly don't make it, but Abraxas handles himself and they go soaring off into the skies successfully. It's this beautiful moment of like trust and happiness and joy between the two of them. Celaena has been taking the time to train on her own, so she's improving, and Rowan's really proud of her. They find another husk body, and she realizes, like with mounting horror, that the smell of this creature from the field and the murder scenes is the same smell that was on the creature from the library. So they're all connected, and she's like, oh my god, these new creatures are like the perfected version of whatever got left behind in Rifthold. They spend the night in the woods tracking, and she tells him about Kale, and then she realizes that Kale couldn't be her mate, because that night when she found Nehemia's body, she attacked Kale and she scratched him. And the way that mates work, once you know about each other and you've accepted it, you can't physically hurt each other. Like, it makes you sick and sad to try to do that to your mate. And she had already accepted the fact that she loved Kale. So the fact that she was able to hurt him proves to her that like he couldn't be her mate. Even though Rowan doesn't confirm it, he also agrees that like, yeah, that sounds pretty unlikely that they were mates. They follow the trail of the creatures down to the coast, and they find a mortal army, the general, and 3 creatures living in the caves. The creatures and the general all have on necklaces of black onyx. Turns out they're going to attack the fortress and the Demi-Fae. One of the creatures catches Celaena and then chases her. They make like a diversion, but it's not working and they're getting hunted. And then Celaena is like, hold on, I have an idea. She lights a fire, lures the skinwalkers back in, and then the skinwalkers and the creature fight each other and tear each other apart. Back at Mistward, they all prepare for battle. They ask for help from Winlin, but not from Maeve, because they know that she won't do it since she doesn't care about the Demi-Fae, and she'll probably just recall Rowan out of spite. Celaena tells him that Maeve doesn't deserve him because he's willing to stay and fight. But Winlin gets attacked by those other forces that came out of Adarlan, so there's no one coming to help them. Then we get the horrible, terrible, awful news that after Nehemia died, and those riots started up in the Calaculla mine, the king had everyone murdered. Not just in Calaculla, but also in Endeavor. So there are no more slaves alive for Celaena to even save. She goes outside and faces the magical barrier that protects the fortress and just blasts her power into it, just funneling as much as she possibly can to make the barrier stronger. And she is absolutely and completely heartbroken. Cale is preparing to leave for Aniel, and then the king tells him, Adian, and Dorian about the slaves being killed, and he's all callous about it. He's like, we're gonna have to catch some more rebels so we can send people back over to the mines to keep working. And the boys are just sick and disgusted. Dorian wants Sorsha to run, but she refuses because she doesn't want to leave him behind, and she says they have to face it together. Adian is feeling so guilty and upset about everything that they've all lost, and he knows that the other continents must just hate them because they just bow down to the king. We get a POV of the royal orchestra. That night in the theater, they play the songs of all the different nations that had people in the mines that were murdered. And then the king has all of them killed too, and he shuts down the theater. Rowan calls for his friends to help them at the fortress, but it doesn't look like anybody's gonna get there in time, so he tells Celaena that she is more than welcome to go to Dornell with his blessing and get her answers from Maeve and keep fighting. But she refuses to go and tells him that she will follow him to whatever end. And he finally gives her back her weapons and calls her Fireheart. No one flees the fortress, okay? So they all gear up to fight. But then the monsters show up at the front gates, and it's not the whole army. It's just those 3 creatures with the black collars. They have a darkness magic that's the same thing that like swept over Celaena, and if it ensnares you, it replays your darkest memories over and over again while they eat you and drain you of life, leaving behind the husk bodies. Despite Rowan not wanting her to do it, Celaena convinces him to let her go outside of the magical barrier so that she can use her fire magic and burn the creatures, since we know that they don't respond well to light. He has to agree because the mortal men sneak in through the tunnels and he has to go attack them. Turns out they were betrayed by one of the like sentinels, and that's how everybody knows how to get inside. When Celaena faces the creatures, she pulls out her sword. It's Goldrin, which is the sword of the lover that Maeve had, and also Brannon of the Wildfire. So Celaena has a memory flash of Cain being like, you were all brought back, all the players of the unfinished game. And she's like, uh-oh, I'm in danger. So the creatures are Valg princes, and they were brought back because there was a mortal man that was foolish enough to invite them. It's getting real bad, but then from up over a hill, Celaena can see a towering man, a massive bird, 2 wolves, 1 dark, 1 light, and a mountain lion come barreling down. It's Rowan's friends. They just run right by her though, except for Gavriel, the mountain lion, who knows who she is and stops to help her as best he can. The other boys help Rowan enough so that he can leave and go to Celaena, but then Gavriel stops him and is like, my guy, she's not doing good. You're gonna lose her any second. She is this close to burning out. Rowan sees her get overcome by the darkness, and then we go back to her POV. The Valg princes are keeping her alive because they're enjoying all of her sorrow and terror and horrible memories, and they're just making her relive them over and over again. We get a couple flashback memories. The first one is Aelin as a child at her castle. Dorian and the king came to visit, and the king tried to use his dark power to like claw into her mind. She had a panic attack over it and exploded with her magic. So that was one of the reasons why people didn't think she could control herself, because she was a little girl and all these people kept messing with her. Her family assumed it was some attack by Maeve and never even considered that it could be the king because he's supposed to be a human. Then we learn that one of the women in the court who was really close to Aelin while she was growing up, her name's Lady Marian, she helped the night that Aelin escaped by sacrificing herself. She basically got Aelin out of her parents' room and then sent her running off into the night. Aelin turned around and watched as the woman was like attacked by the same creature. It's one of the Valg that had attacked her parents, and he cut off Lady Marian's head. The last thing Marian ever said to Aelin was, please tell my Elodie that I love her very much. I say Elodie like melody. I think it's actually a lead. Whichever way you'd like to say it is fine. When Celaena then fell into the water, she lost the amulet of Arenth, which was like a special family heirloom that her mother had given her to keep her safe. Lady Marian's sacrifice is the one that finally broke Celaena because it never amounted to anything. She didn't become queen like she was supposed to, and she failed. Struggling to remember who she is inside of all this darkness, Celaena is suddenly surrounded by all her family members, and they start telling her to get up. And then she sees Princess Aelin, and she also tells her to get up. She reaches for her own hand. Just as they touch, it's like enough to like get her to her feet, and she just unleashes even more power, even though she was supposed to have reached burnout, and she burns the Valg alive. She kills 2 of them, but she's too weak to finish the 3rd creature and the general. But then Rowan comes running in, he cuts open his palm, and he offers himself to her so that they can become Karanam and they can share power. It works, and she burns them all. Dorian and Sorsha are being cute in her workroom when Kale comes running in. He tells Dorian that he's picked a side, it's his, and then he tells Sorsha that he thinks the kingdom could do with a healer for a queen, but she doesn't return his smile. They test out Kale's theory with Dorian's help with like a little magical ritual thing, and they realize that the towers and the triangle are the way that the king is freezing magic. So if they could break even just one of the towers, it should destroy the spell and magic should return. Because Kale was so honest with him, Dorian admits that even if he could go back to the way things were and the person he was before, he wouldn't, because he's happy with his magic and he thinks it was a good change. Kale says he truly looks and sounds like a king in that moment. After resting to recover after using so much power, Celaena and Rowan go out together to a forest pool to kind of like rest still and relax. While she's reflecting on everything, Celaena realizes that one of the word keys is in the amulet of Arendt, and that's what kept her family protected for so long. She knows that Arobynn must have taken it the night she fell into the river. Rowan wants to know what she's figured out, but he can't be trusted because he's bound to Maeve forever, so she can't tell him. But she does tell him her entire life story, which is something that she's never told anybody. They prepare to leave to travel to Doranel, and she tells the Demi-Fae that once she reclaims her throne, they're all gonna have a place in Terrasen, and specifically, she tells Imris and Malachi and Luca that they will have a place in her household as her friends. Imris tells her that her mother would be proud of her. The news of Aelin fighting over in Winland travels the continent. Murtaugh immediately sends word to all the other countries, telling them to just hold on for a little while longer because Aelin is coming back. Rin decides to stay in Rifthold to keep fighting. The king is enraged, but he doesn't know that Celaena and Aelin are the same person. So Dorian is just playing the role of like quiet, dutiful prince because he's like, if I can just hold out for a little while longer, Celaena's gonna come back and she's gonna save me and Sorsha. Celaena and Rowan get to Doranel, which is a big city built entirely of stone, plopped in the middle of a river basin. Maeve wants to see her power, but Celaena insists on answers first. Maeve tells us that the word keys cannot be destroyed. They can only be put back into the gate, but nobody knows how to do that. If the king gets all 3 of them, he will be unstoppable. She explains that the Valg come in the forms of many different creatures, like the spiders and the witches, but the Valg princes are the ones that take over people's bodies. The only way to kill them is by burning them or cutting off their heads. We also learned that Brannon wasn't of noble blood. He was simply loved by Mala, the sun goddess, and he was given the power of her fire. So the mark on Celaena's brow is the bastard's mark, or the nameless mark. Maeve wants to know where the key is because she knows that Aelin's figured it out, but Aelin refuses to tell her. So she has the other men on Rowan's team come in and orders them to whip him, and because they're all blood oath to each other, they can't fight back, so they do it. She knows that Celaena cares about him, so she's like, what's the information worth to you? If not your life, surely Prince Rowan's is worth it. But Rowan speaks up and defies the oath to tell her not to tell Maeve anything. So Celaena unleashes her fire on the entire city, and Maeve is like, girl, my city's made of stone. What are you gonna do? And Celaena looks her dead in the eyes and goes, but your people aren't. My bitch, my bitch, my bitch, I love her so much. So Celaena turns on Maeve, and tells her what she figured out from listening to Imris's stories, which is that Maeve wanted the keys for herself, and Brannon was fighting against her to keep her from getting them. That lover that she loved so much turned on her, so Maeve killed him. Then she shows Maeve the memory that the general gave her right before he died, which was Aelin becoming queen and the whole continent being happy and Terrasen thriving under her rule. She then tells Maeve that she found her lover's ring inside the hilt of the sword, and she'll give it to her if Maeve will remove Rowan's blood oath. Maeve agrees, and Rowan is so shocked that he just stumbles over to Aelin and holds her face and just keeps repeating her name over and over again, just stunned. And then he drops down on both knees and reaches for her arm. She's like, whoa, 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 my good sir, you are free now. There's no need to do that. And he's like, trust me. She knows how powerful we are together. If we're connected like this, she'll never make a stand against you. He says he claims her to whatever end, just like she did for him. And he wants them to build a court that will change the world together. So she gives him the blood oath, which is gonna be a really big deal in the next book, and she probably should have thought it through a little bit more. Then they leave Dorinel, and then the next day, Celaena has Rowan tattoo the stories of her parents and her uncle and her people and Nehemia and Sam onto her back across the scars that she has. She also finally has the time to properly mourn them, so while he's working, she cries and says her prayers and sings for them. She says that she will no longer keep them locked in her heart, and she will no longer be ashamed. The witches compete in the war games. Iskra is truly terrible, and she has her wyvern attack Petra's wyvern and gives it the command to kill, which is not what they're supposed to be doing. They're basically supposed to be doing like extreme capture the flag in the sky. Petra's wyvern starts to free fall and she passes out in the saddle, so she can't escape. Her mother is watching with the other matrons and she screams. Manon says she's never heard a mother scream before, so she goes diving through the sky to save them. While Manon is saving Petra, she can see that her wyvern Keely is doing everything to try to make it easier. So even though she is like mortally wounded and falling out of the sky and dying, she like keeps her wings steady so that Manon can get on her back and keep Petra tied to her and stuff like that. It's so intense, and Manon can feel the unconditional love coming off of Keely, even though she's never felt that stuff before because she's a witch and they don't have emotions. She thanks her before jumping off, knowing that Abraxas will catch them, and then Keely crashes into the bottom of the canyon and doesn't get back up. The Blackbeaks win, and Manon is made wing leader. Petra is in mourning and doesn't get out of bed for days, which again is not really an emotion the witches are supposed to have. As punishment for saving Petra, Manon's grandma beats her and then brings in a Crocan witch and is like, we've been keeping her held captive here. We've been questioning her to see what they're planning. Your cloak's looking a little worn and dirty. Why don't you kill her and you can have hers as a new one? Manon's upset about this, but she doesn't want to show weakness in front of everybody, so she walks up to the Crocan and faces her. The girl looks at her and is just like, Manon, do you want to know the big secret about the Crocans? It's that you guys already know how to defeat the curse. We pity you because you haven't even figured it out. She reminds her that the Iron Teeth and Manon specifically are monsters, not because they were born that way, but because they were made into them. The girl then like looks at Manon and is like, do it. And Manon realizes that it's not a taunt, it's a plea. So she kills her, but she immediately regrets it. While talking with Adian about next steps for them, Kale realizes that while Celaena was always going to pick him, Aelin probably won't, seeing as how she's queen. We get a small POV of Sorsha saying that she does love Dorian, but she's terrified to ever be queen because she doesn't think she's brave enough. The boys and Sorsha then get called to meet with the king. The room is filled with those scary guards in the black suits, okay? So not Kale's men. The king wants to know why Adian and Kale have been spending so much time together, and he threatens Sorsha's life. But Dorian is like, Dad, no, I'm serious. I don't know. Please don't hurt her. The king then asks who the traitor is in the castle, and Adian steps forward and owns everything before Kale can do it, because Adian thinks that saving Kale is the right thing for Celaena, since she doesn't know Adian anymore, but she loves Kale. The king is then like, oh, okay, perfect, Adian. I'm so glad I know the truth about you and your ring that doesn't work. But you know what? I'm not gonna kill you. I'm gonna keep you alive and use you as a trap for your dear cousin, which is Adian's nightmare. So now he's being dragged away to the dungeons. Then the king tells them that he can't let them go because the true traitor is still in the room, and points at Sorsha. Turns out all those little letters she was frantically writing to her friends in her workroom were going to Ren, and she's a rebel. But she never told them about Dorian. Sorsha confesses, hoping that it will at least save Dorian from getting into trouble. Dorian gets on his knees in front of his dad and begs for her life to be spared. The king goes, no, and they cut off her head. Dorian screams, and Kale says it is the most horrible sound he's ever heard. Adian is still being dragged from the room, and he starts roaring because he's Fae and like trying to get out of the chains. I don't know how the guards hold him back. It's almost like they've got weird superhuman strength or something. Watching Dorian struggle through the puddle of her blood as if he could put her head back on her body is finally the thing that makes Kale go, you know what? I've simply had enough. I will be fighting back now. So he draws his sword on the king and says that he quits and he will no longer work for him. It's about time. But then he also says that there's one true king in the room, and there's always only been one, and he is not sitting on the throne. And Dorian's like, damn, me? You talking about me? The king then tries to have Kale shot on sight, and the archers draw their bows and start shooting at him, and Dorian loses it and explodes with magic, shatters the arrows in midair, and gives himself away, giving in to the trap that the king set. This was all a plan to get all of them in one fell swoop. So Dorian and the king start fighting. Dorian is crying. He's covered in blood. He tells Kale to run, and before Kale leaves him, he looks at him and he goes, I love you, because he has realized that like they truly are brothers. It's more than anything. They're brothers. Dorian's like, when you get back, burn this place to the ground, and Kale flees. Then the king overpowers Dorian and puts a collar of black stone around his throat. Dorian says that he feels pain, and then the darkness sweeps in and swallows him whole. Kale grabs Fleetfoot from Celaena's room and goes rushing down the tunnels. He tells Mort exactly where he's going and what his plans is so that Celaena can find him. And then he steals Damaris from the tomb and runs. He goes and tells Rin what happened, and Rin is horrified, but this is the moment where they become friends, and he's like, we'll get them back, both Adian and your prince. Manon and the 13 get sent over to Marath so they can work specifically for Duke Parrington, but the other witches stay in the Farian Gap. Kale throws his captain's sword into the river. So Celaena needs to go back to Rifthold to get the Amulet of Arinth and that word key that's in there. But Rowan can't go with her because he'll either be stuck in his Fae form or his Hawk form since magic doesn't work. He doesn't want to let her go, especially now that they have the Blood Oath, but finally he reluctantly agrees. We also learn that he had prayed to Mala, you know, the sun goddess, to make sure that Celaena made it through the fight and that she had the strength to do what she needed to do. It was a risk for him to do that, since his powers are ice and wind, so Mala could have been kind of like disrespected or upset with him for talking to her. But Rowan's like, no, actually, I think she kind of likes me a little bit. And also, she thinks we make a pretty good pair. Celaena prepares to leave, and she finally accepts who she is. The final line is,
she was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, and she would not be afraid.
oh my god. I hope you guys enjoyed that recap of Heir of Fire. I love this book. It's one of my favorites in the series. From now on, the story's just gonna get better and better and better, okay? It's just building. We're building to something so good, so cool, so sick and twisted. I can't wait. I'm a little nervous because we have Queen of Shadows next, and then I need to do the tandem read, which is Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. At the same time, I'm real nervous about that one, but we're gonna make it work. And then Kingdom of Ash is almost 1,000 pages long. January is gonna be busy, but I hope you guys are doing well and enjoying this series. If you are, don't forget to leave a like and comment down below. I love talking to you guys each week. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you so soon. Have a good one. Bye.